Okay, I want to ask you something before we even get started today. Do you ever feel like what you do doesn't count? Like the work you're pouring yourself into, the meals you're making, the husband you're taking care of, the children you're raising, the students you're teaching, the people you're counseling, your patients you're taking care of, the prayers you're praying, like you're just going in circles and maybe God doesn't even really see you or no one really sees you or applauds you. If you feel like you are doing your work in obscurity, I have a story for you today. And it's one of the most overlooked stories in all of Scripture. It's the story of two women whose names most people don't even know. Two women who had no platform, no position, no power. They stood before the most powerful ruler in the known world and simply said, "No, I'm not going to obey you." And because of what they did in secret, in the dark, in the unseen, an entire nation was saved. I need you to stay with me today because this story is for you. Welcome to In God's Eyes. I'm Jennifer Strickland. I'm so excited that you're here. Wherever you are, driving, folding laundry, sitting in your car, making dinner, I believe that God led you to this episode. Today, we're going into Exodus 1, and we're going to sit with two women who changed the trajectory of an entire nation. I'm sure you know who Moses is, right? Miriam, you might even know about Moses' mother, Jochebed, which I have talked about her in a previous episode because God's name is inside of her name. Moses' mom, who surrendered her son to save God's people, just like God surrendered his son to save us. I love that about Moses' mom. But do you know who Shiphrah and Puah are? Those names are so funny. But let me tell you, God knows exactly who they are. He remembered their names when he seems to have forgotten Pharaoh's name because he never recorded Pharaoh's name in the book of life. Okay, let's go. So the book of Exodus opens in darkness, right? God's people, the Israelites, they're enslaved in Egypt. They're building cities under brutal conditions, forced into hard labor, oppressed, abused. The people are crying out. They are desperate for help. And Pharaoh, who's the most powerful man in the known world, is afraid of the Israelites. I love this because they keep multiplying. Because no matter how harshly he treats them, they keep having more babies. This is actually the way of God's people. You can't stop what God has ordained to grow, and we know that our primary command is to be fruitful and to multiply. So Pharaoh devises a plan. He calls in the Hebrew midwives. Now, no one really knows if they were actually Egyptian or if they were Hebrew, but we do know that they were midwives to the Hebrew people, and he gives them an order in Exodus 1:15 through 16. When you help the Hebrew women give birth, watch as they deliver, and if the baby is a boy, kill him. If it's a girl, let her live. Well, this is one of the things, is that girls apparently didn't have very much value back then, but boys did because they would grow up to become warriors, and we kind of need them to be fruitful and multiply. So let that sink in for a moment. He's asking women whose entire vocation is to bring life into the world to become instruments of death. And here is what they do. Because the midwives feared God, they refused to obey the king's orders. Wow, they actually did not submit. Isn't that interesting? These midwives stood up to the most powerful man in the world and said, "We fear God more than we fear you, and we are not going to kill these baby boys." There's no speech. There's no protest march. No public declaration of resistance. They simply go back to work, and they keep bringing life to the baby boys and the baby girls, of course. So who were these midwives? Okay, their names were Shiphrah and Puah. I have to laugh every time I say their names, but Exodus 1:15 gives us their names, and this itself is a profound theological statement. Because Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, the ruler of the most powerful empire in the ancient world, is never named in this passage. But these two women are named. God preserves their name in Scripture for thousands and thousands of years, while the most powerful name alive at the time remains anonymous. If you ever wonder whether God notices the faithful and the unseen, just look at Shiphrah and Puah. Our two midwives of scripture. Now let's talk about what their names mean, because in Hebrew, names are never accidental. Shiphrah, her name means beautiful, brightness, to make pleasing, to make clean. Some scholars connect it with the act of washing and cleansing a newborn child. Her name literally means the beauty she brings into the world with every birth she attends. And Puah, her name means to cry out, to groan, to the birth cry itself. She's named for the sound of new life entering the world. So every time someone called her name, they were speaking the sound of birth. God named the women who gave life with life-giving names. Look, if you feel hidden or unseen or unimportant or insignificant, if you fear God, your name is known. Your work is seen. His eyes search the whole world to see one who would be devoted to him, those that would fear him above fearing man. And God does not forget the faithful. Now, I want to tell you what the Hebrew word for midwife actually means, because it carries a message to every woman listening today. The word is meyaledet, I think, from the root yalad, which means to bear, to bring forth, to beget, to give birth. A midwife in Hebrew is literally one who causes to bring forth. She doesn't create the life. She doesn't own the life. She does not write the story of the life. She simply serves the emergence of what God has already planted, and she creates the conditions for that life to come safely into the world. And I think about many of you. I'm thinking about many of my sisters and friends as I talk about this, because some of you are childless. Some of you just got married. Some of you just got divorced, right? Some of you are hurting over things that you cannot control. Some of you are waiting for your prayers to be answered. Some of you are feeling pregnant with the life of a ministry or a book or a business or a new vision that God is giving you. And I just want you to know that by faithfully serving God and fearing God in the secret places that feel unseen, He sees you, He knows you, He loves you, and He calls you by name. So this is one of the most beautiful pictures of faithful women I have really seen in the scripture. And I don't know if I'm obsessed with the name midwife. I was thinking about it today when I was at the gym. I'm like, why do I keep thinking about the midwives? And then I started thinking about it when I was working out today. I was like, oh, maybe because everybody calls me the writing midwife. Maybe that's what it is. You know, I sit along with women and she's got a book in her heart and I help her birth it. I help her write her story. I help her create something that wasn't already there, or publish her Bible study or whatever it is. And I guess I'm kind of serving in that midwife role alongside another woman in the emergence of what God planted inside of her and helping it come safely into the world so it can breathe and live and reach the people it was always meant to reach. And I think so many of us as women, whether you're a teacher or a mom at home, a mentor, a counselor, you could be a lawyer, but a woman who is pouring into others that sometimes feels like actually, the truth is, I like the unseen, which sounds crazy because here I am on a weekly show and we're putting reels on Instagram and all that stuff. I don't really care about all of that stuff, but I do care about speaking to women around the world and about their value and about the power and the worth of your story. And so because of that, I do cherish the idea of being a midwife for other women's stories to come forth. And I think in a way, all women are midwives. I think of the women who have prayed for me, who have walked alongside me, who have held up my hands, who have encouraged me through trials, with my children or with my marriage or with extended family or finances, whatever it might be. The women who have walked alongside me are also part of birthing this podcast and this ministry. Look, definitely am not doing this thing alone, right? I even think of my husband's mother, who so many years served and helped take care of my children when I traveled and spoke at young girls conferences, continues to pray for our family, continues to pour in to our children. My own mother and all of the prayer partners and women who've supported me and traveled with me along the way. All of you guys are midwives that have birthed this ministry. So every person you've ever helped bring forth in faith, in calling, in healing, in courage, you created the conditions for that life. You are the midwife, the one that causes to bring forth. And that's not a small thing, okay? That is a holy thing, and that is a thing that is seen by God. If you think about the preeminence, the position of Pharaoh in the book of Exodus, and his name doesn't even get written in the book of life, yet these two women, because they feared God, God writes their name in the Holy Scriptures. I think that's really incredible, and it shows how much he loved and respected their choice to protect life, which brings us, of course, to the name for the word woman. I don't know if you have read my book, I Am a Woman, or not. I just want to give a shout out to that, and just really quickly, not trying to self-promote, just trying to make sure you know how to define the word woman. And if you don't, this book is powerful for the definitions alone, because when you open up and excavate the Hebrew word for woman, it tells us women are life givers. Women are life givers. When you excavate the Hebrew word for woman, you discover women are life givers. Women save life. We give life. We protect life. We nurture life. And that is the definition of the word woman itself and the word female itself, which is why it's so important that Bible-believing women really need to answer the question, what is a woman? That is completely up to us. It's completely up to the church, and it's actually not difficult to do. It's the most fascinating study that I have ever done. So the link for I'm a Woman is below. Even if there's a woman who might be interested in it in your life, or she doesn't even know what ezer kenegdo means, she doesn't know that she is to be, the word is not helper suitable when she gets married. The word is the person who brings life-giving help to her husband. That is what you do when you're married. You are, or you're supposed to. You're created to be a life giver to him and to bring life-giving help. How awesome is that? What a high calling is that, especially when God himself calls himself the help of us, the one who we cry out, Lord, you are my helper. He uses the same word to describe the word woman. So these midwives are living up to their name. And this is something else that God respects about the midwives. When Shiphrah and Puah, the two midwives, they have the first recorded act of civil disobedience in all of Scripture. It is these two women who stand up against the government in Scripture. Okay? Oh my gosh. Where were they when I was writing I Am a Woman? I wouldn't put them in here because this book was a big way, not to defy the government, but to speak truth. And in a way, it was a defiance to what the government was trying to say, that men can be women and all of that garbage that is absolutely a total lie, is that we had to stand up and say, no. We fear God more than we fear man. We're created male and female, and we're gonna speak about this. We're not gonna be afraid of it and shrink back out of intimidation. And that's exactly the case with these incredible midwives. First recorded act of civil disobedience in Scripture, before Moses parts the Red Sea, before Daniel refuses to stop praying, before Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to bow to Nebuchadnezzar's golden image, before any of the great celebrated acts of courage against ungodly authority, there was two women who simply kept giving life quietly, in the dark, at great personal risk, with no audience, no recognition, no one watching except for God. And then Pharaoh calls them in and he's like, why have you done this? Why have you allowed the boys to live? And listen what they say. I'm not really sure if they told him the truth or not. They're like, the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They are more vigorous. They have their babies so quickly, we just can't get there in time. Now, scholars kind of debate whether or not this was entirely true or whether this was sort of a protective deception, similar to Rahab, who hid the spies on her rooftop and misdirected the soldiers. Either way, God does not condemn them. He blesses them because they fear God more than they fear Pharaoh. And that fear, that holy, reverent, Godward orientation produced a courage that Pharaoh's entire army could not manufacture, right? Proverbs 29:25 says, the fear of man will prove to be a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is kept safe, and he keeps them safe. We also know from Proverbs 31:31, charm is deceptive, right? Beauty is fleeting, and a woman who fears the Lord is to be greatly praised. So Shiphrah and Puah were not fearless women. They were women who were afraid of the right thing, which was going against God's laws. The midwives feared God more than they feared Pharaoh, and that one reorientation from the fear of man to the fear of God is what put their names in the book of life. So I would have to ask, like, what are you scared of right now? And what would it look like for you to reorient your fear of man to fear of God, or fear of anything, really? What are you afraid of? What people are going to think? Right. That's a big one, right? That's been a big one for me at this point. You know, I'm 52. What am I? 52, 53 years old? I'm not sure. But I don't really have that much time to worry about what people think of me anymore. I just don't. It just doesn't really matter unless they're my family, unless they're the people that I love the most. But even that, we still have to follow God's call on our life, regardless of what other people think about it. So what would it look like for you to fear God first? So that's a good question just for you to be thinking about today. Because in Exodus 1 verse 20, we see that God was good to the midwives, and the Israelites continued to multiply, growing more and more powerful. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. In Hebrew, that word families literally means households. In the ancient world, a household was not just a building, it was your legacy. It was your inheritance, your future written in flesh and blood for future generations. So these women preserved life, and then God gave them life in return. They kept children in the world, so God gave them children. They built households of faith in secret, and then God built them a household. Pretty awesome, because this is the economy of God. You can't give him, you can't outserve him. And what you pour out in faithfulness, in secret, in the quiet, when no one is looking, when you are being that life giver that God created you to be, whether it's in a hospital or next to a hospital bed, or it's in your home, he multiplies that back to you in ways you don't expect and you can't plan yourself. So he rewards what is done in the unseen. And I just want to encourage you with that today, because if you're a woman who longs for children or doesn't have them, or who's poured her life into other people's children as a teacher, a mentor, a spiritual mom, an aunt, a friend, or you wonder if your work is really counting, you know, these midwives may not have had biological children before this moment, but God gave them a legacy built from their faithfulness in the unseen. And your investment in other people's children, or even your own children, is a holy calling. God is building you a household, and he is multiplying his people through you. So it sometimes feels unglamorous, but remember Shiphrah and Puah, who saved a nation one birth at a time. And you're doing the same thing. You just might not be able to see the fruit of it yet. Now, I want to show you something beautiful, because midwives appear at very critical thresholds of new life in Scripture, and this is not accidental. In Genesis 35:17, the very first midwife in Scripture appears at this heartbreaking moment when Rachel, Jacob's beloved wife, is dying in labor with her second son, and the midwife comforts her and tells her, Do not be afraid. You have another son. She's unnamed, but she's present. And at the threshold of death and life simultaneously, there is a woman there speaking courage into another woman who is afraid. And I believe that is you so often, speaking courage into another woman who's afraid. In that moment, you're kind of being like a midwife, right? You're being someone who is carrying something precious and helping life come from it. And in Isaiah 66, God even speaks in the language of a midwife. He says, do I close up the womb and not bring delivery? God basically says, look, I'm the one who brings to birth. I'm the one who doesn't abandon the delivery of the dream inside of you, of the person your child is meant to be, of the birth of your legacy. He's like, look, I don't start what I do not finish. And what I've planted in you, I will bring forth. And so God is also like a midwife. He shows up and he doesn't abandon the delivery of the dreams inside of our heart. He calls us to do the same thing for each other. And this is one thing that really undoes me about this story is these midwives had no idea what they were protecting, right? So often we are planting seeds or watering it or speaking into the next generation and doing something that feels right in the moment, but we really don't know the long-term fruit of what we're investing in, especially when it comes to the next generation, whether it's somebody you stop and talk to in the store, maybe somebody you visit in the hospital, maybe it's somebody at church that you feel prompted to pray for, maybe it's your own child. As I think about many times, just planting seeds and watering seeds of faith and hope and love into my children. I didn't always do things right, but all my children know that Jesus is Lord. They all fear God, and I believe they all will walk with God. We still have a 15-year-old, but the older two have an incredible faith in God, and they really all do. And I think about that's one thing that Shane and I did do right. We may have done a lot wrong, but we definitely planted faith in them, and I think that is going to last for generations to come, and that's what you're doing. I just want to remind you of that today, that whatever you're doing in the unseen, whether it's doing laundry or doing dishes or taking care of someone who's not loving you well at the moment, just remember that God rewards the unseen and he rewards the faithful. Look, these midwives, they didn't know among the boys they saved was Moses, or that Moses would one day stand before Pharaoh and say, let my people go. They didn't know that the nation they preserved in secret would be the nation through which Jesus Christ would enter the world. Think about that. They just kept showing up. They just kept giving life. They just kept fearing God more than they feared man. And God used what they did in secret to change human history. And so I just want to encourage you with that today and let you know that if you don't see the fruit of your faithfulness yet, you're pouring and giving and serving and praying and showing up and you can't see what it's producing. The midwives couldn't see it either. They just kept giving life. And you don't need to see the end of the story to be faithful in the middle of it. God sees the end, and he's using what you do in secret to write a story bigger than you can imagine. So thank you so much for joining me on the show today. This was super fun to look deep into the midwives and to realize that when we give life, when we stand up against injustice, when we fear God more than we fear man, and we serve God in the hidden places, our names are written in the book of life. God sees, God knows, and God blesses, and he multiplies our efforts far beyond anything that we can even ask for or imagine. So thanks so much for joining me today. My name is Jennifer Strickland. This is the In God's Eyes podcast. Share this with a woman in your life who might need to be encouraged today, and we will see you next week.